Ivan knew he didn't have much longer to live. He was over 70 years old and sick with a condition that could not be cured. Thankfully, he was not poor. He came from a noble family and his grandfather had once owned an estate. But instead of sitting around, Ivan decided to build ships. He was successful and eventually earned a large fortune. He lost everything during tough times, but he still had his business skills and went to Europe. There, he kept building ships and became a millionaire once more. His father kept his origins a secret. He enrolled in a college, studied history, and later taught at the university. The man grew up in a good home, received an education, worked as an engineer in the 1990s, but lost his job. He started his own business from scratch. He built houses, opened hotels and restaurants in different cities. He refused to work with dishonest people in his business. He was successful because he was honest and smart. Today, he dismissed the driver and opted to stroll home for some fresh air. His heart felt tight and at times he struggled to breathe. The discomfort persisted as he walked down the street. Suddenly, a sharp pain seized his chest, causing him to collapse and lose consciousness. Sergey, in his 30s, was on his way back from a part-time job. His pay was consistently insufficient, so he had taken up employment as a porter at a small hotel near the station. Though it paid little, clients occasionally gave him extra shifts, and his family relied on the additional income. The young children, including Yuleshka, who required frequent rehabilitation treatment due to cerebral palsy, had dinner and went to bed. The husband was too exhausted to help manage the children, leaving the task to his quiet wife, Lyudmila, who never complained. The husband, pale and possibly overworked, considered finding another part-time job. Lost in thought, he didn't initially notice an elderly man lying on a nearby bench. People rushed past without noticing, and Sergey wondered if the man had too much to drink or was suffering from another ailment. Two other women approached and laid the elderly man on the bench, placing a bag under his head. They called an ambulance and Sergey unbuttoned his shirt, searching for a pulse. Luckily, the ambulance arrived swiftly and he accompanied the stranger to the hospital. Although the man had no identification on him, Sergey recognized his face. The man was admitted to the hospital without providing any information. From all indications, the man had suffered a heart attack, and Sergey felt compassion for him and his loved ones. No one could inform him, so he decided to visit the old man. When the old man was conscious, he wrote down the phone number of the hospital. Despite being busy, Sergey called every day to check the elderly man's health. The patient had heart surgery, and after 3 days, he came to his senses, but was still weak. Sergey bought fruit and cookies and went to visit him. "It was you who brought me to the hospital," the patient said with a smile and thanked him from the heart. They introduced themselves. Ivan Evgenievich didn't want to tell his relatives about his attack. His spouse went on vacation with their children. He didn't want to make them unhappy. The man inquired about Sergey's family and job. The elderly man had a friendly face, listened well, and surprisingly, the guy confided in him about his troubles. The hotel where Sergey worked was very familiar. He complained about the low pay and the rude staff. "Ivan Evgenievich, I think I've seen you before, but I don't remember where." "The world is small. Maybe we've crossed paths before and will again." Every regular person was uncomfortable, as the man spoke as if he was a close relative, either a father or uncle. "That's the problem," objected Ivan Evgenievich mournfully, "that there aren't many normal people left." They parted ways as friends, exchanging phone numbers. 2 weeks later, Sergey was astonished when Ivan Evgenievich arrived at the hotel. All the employees were fussing to clean every speck of dust. Every pen was polished to a shine, because it doesn't happen often that the owner himself visits. The owner surprised the staff when he walked up to Sergey with a smile. He shook his hand and without hesitation asked Evgenievich about his health. The next day, the manager offered him the position of manager, but he refused because he lacked experience in leading people. Instead, everyone shouted and laughed at his shabby clothes. Ivan Evgenievich had been married to a young, beautiful woman for several years, and they had 2 boys. His wife took care of their upbringing, and the entrepreneur's wife never refused anything and enjoyed being in the spotlight in society. She often went on vacation in different countries. However, Their relationship eventually fell apart. Their relationship had broken down due to business trips. When the spouse returned, they were in a great mood but did not share details of their pastime. Ivan Evgenievich knew he was no longer young and that the warmth in their relationship had faded. He had a son from a previous marriage who lived in America, and they occasionally spoke over the phone. He was successfully engaged in business and did not need anything, but he was an elderly man and very lonely. They were friends in their youth, but then lost touch. The price for their property was already under 50. A generous stranger's act of kindness deeply moved him. He felt compelled to aid a man in need of financial assistance, but was unsure how to proceed. Sergei was unlikely to accept help without hesitation. One morning, Ivan Evgenievich knocked on Sergei's apartment door, bringing fruit and sweets for the children and offering to visit over tea. Sergei introduced his new friend to the family, a group unaware of the previous crisis and the person who saved them. The man happily recounted how Lyusia's husband, the father of their family, performed a heroic act by assisting a man in distress. Lyusia confirmed that her husband had no other choice but to help. The children agreed and called their father the greatest hero. It was clear that the children adored their father. Everyone present was moved by the story. Sergei felt moved and embarrassed and blushed. The man was invited to the table and provided delicious cakes and fruit. He praised the hostess for the tea and played with the children in the car. Afterward, Ivan Evgenievich offered Sergei a job as a manager in his company for the time being. When Ivan announced the salary, Sergei thought he must have misheard, as he had never held such a large sum of money. It was uncomfortable for Sergei to refuse. He agreed, even though he doubted if everything was for the benefit of his guest. Quit all your jobs today and start working seriously. You and your family near Chizh will receive help. I don't know what to do immediately, but don't worry, Sergei, we will teach you. Ivan Evgenievich promised that after a month of study, you will receive half of your salary. Half of his earnings, together with part-time work at night, were still several times less than what he needed. He couldn't sleep because of the stress, and his wife Lyusia spent a long time ironing his shirt collar to make him look professional for his new job. The next day, the young man was anxious and afraid of not living up to his boss's and Ivan Evgenievich's expectations. Once he arrived at the main office, he was personally guided through the offices and introduced to the staff. Ivan introduced him as his friend. The respected chief kindly offered to teach a modestly dressed boy about manager work. The boy was quickly registered in the personnel department and even given an advance payment. He had to dress according to the company's requirements within a month. Afterward, Sergei looked handsome in an expensive suit, white shirt, and tie. The new manager turned out to be smart and persistent, quickly learning about the profession's subtleties, documentation order, and customer communication methods. He left promptly. Sergei worked hard and often came home late, eventually surpassing his colleagues to become the top manager at the company. After 2 years, he achieved great success and was promoted to manager at the chief's company. He no longer needed to ask his employees for assistance, as he developed a good understanding of business himself. Sergei was not arrogant and got along well with his fellow employees. His relationship with the chief was warm and friendly. They often visited each other. Their children were about the same age and often played together. Ivan Evgenievich trusted Sergei. He mentored him as family life improved when the young man purchased a car and a new, roomy apartment close to the office. He also hired a nanny to aid his wife with the children, and their youngest daughter underwent treatment and rehabilitation at a center. As a result, her illness diminished, and Julia could walk on her own. The parents expressed gratitude towards their benefactor, and the chief summoned the manager to his office, offering him the position until he returned from his absence. In the United States, for medical reasons, Sergei may need to have a heart surgery. He agreed to manage the company several times while the boss was away on trips. After a while, he received a call from Germany informing him that Ivan Evgenievich had died during the operation. The manager quickly made the needed arrangements. Sergei went home with tears streaming down his face, and Lyusia, his wife, was also crying, as Annie July loved her grandfather very much, but it was uncertain what the heirs would do with the company. Most likely, they would have to give up their favorite job. A few days later, Sergei was invited by a notary public to announce the deed of the company. Sergei was confused when he received notice of the chief's inheritance. On the appointed day, he arrived at the specified address to find several unfamiliar people already in the office, along with his wife, Ivan Evgenievich. The will stipulated that Sergei's wife and children would inherit an apartment, country house, and capital, while all of his company's hotels and office space would be bequeathed to the former porter who had worked with him for several years and was now managing the company's affairs. This individual was deemed the only one capable of maintaining the business. All of the listeners were shocked. Sergei was also surprised and couldn't speak. The young man believed that Ivan Evgenievich befriended him out of pity. He'd assumed his career was due to his master's kindness, but he never considered that the chief would leave him the company as inheritance. He left the office in a daze and went straight home. The text was already devoid of context and adheres to the principles of simple writing. So the answer is a simple porter what? You are so talented for that Ivan Evgenievich appreciated you, Lyusia, brushed away a tear, such a good man. I was very lucky to have you, Lyusia, spouses embraced and sat down to drink tea together after that Sergei was dragged through the courts for 6 months. Relatives of the late, the relatives of the deceased, even tried to prove that the owner was insane. No one verified the info, and the guy would have declined the inheritance. However, the notary handed him a note from Ivan Evgenievich that explained his choice and urged him not to succumb to instigation. Ivan's relatives let his hard work go to waste. After the trials, Sergei took charge of a vast company. One kind deed altered a humble man's life drastically.